Hey, college football fans, welcome to episode 36 of Walk It Off with Chappy. And we are now into ACC preview time, so we're going to talk about a team from the ACC, the Clemson Tigers. And after 6 straight years of making the college football playoff and fans and opponents hearing the band play the Clemson Tiger rag, well, not making it last year, a lot of people started to rag on the Tigers. And so the question was asked, with Clemson not even making the ACC championship game, has Dabo lost it a little bit? Has Clemson come back down to earth? Are we seeing a changing of the guard in the Atlantic Coast Conference? And to that I say, pump the brakes, please. Please pump the brakes. Clemson lost 3 games last year, and 2 of those games were by 1 score. All 3 games combined were by a deficit of 23 total points. You know how much Michigan lost against Georgia in their CFP semifinal game last year? 23 points. So in 1 game, Michigan lost by as many as Clemson was defeated by for the entire season. And I know that people point to the offense last year and say, well, DJU did not perform up to expectations. Well, I think part of that was because he had some young receivers who were not as developed or mature as we thought. And also, I don't think that he had really any kind of positive pressure last year. I mean, you look at Kelly Bryant. He was pushed by Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was pushed by DJU. DJU last year was pushed by really nobody. This offseason, he has dedicated a lot of time and work to honing his craft. He has lost, I think, 30 pounds, which makes him more versatile. And I think that also does something for you mentally as well. Anytime you're putting in the work to get better, whether it's losing weight, getting faster, getting stronger, that's all going towards, it's hard, it's tough. And so that's going to push him mentally when the season comes along. And I give him the first 3 weeks. If he's not performing up to where he needs to be by game 4, when they when they play at Wake Forest, that's where we might see Cade Klubnik get a shot if DJU is not lighting defenses on fire. Because in game 5, they've got NC State, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the rest of that offense, they've got 3 very talented running backs, led by Will Shipley, who I think is an all-ACC back. Phil Maffa and Kobe Pace are a great change of pace, no pun intended. They provide some thunder to Shipley's lightning, and they're going to be running behind a talented offensive front. 4 starters come back from last year's group that finished 37th in sacks given up, 27th in tackles for loss allowed, and I think they were in the 50s in total rush offense. So they can move defensive fronts, they can run the football. At receiver, they weren't as mature as we thought that they were last year, but I think those guys have developed, and I think we're going to see a better overall receiving group this year, led by Bo Collins and EJ Williams, Joe Nagata. The latter 2 had very impressive springs. And then you threw on there Dakari Collins and Troy Stellato, who a lot of people think is going to pop this year out of that slot position. So they've got the talent catching the ball. Davis at tight end, as well as Jake Briningstool, I think is going to be a player that will also pop and emerge. He's just a matchup nightmare as a tall, lanky, athletic, and quick tight end. It's going to be tough for some linebackers to cover. Then you move over to the defensive side of the ball, and they are just stacked. I mean, they legitimately could have about 8 guys on first-team All-ACC. You look at their defensive ends, right? Miles Murphy, KJ Henry, Xavier Thomas. Those 3 are going to rotate and get a lot of big plays their way. D tackles, Brian Brzee, who is my pick for ACC Defensive Player of the Year candidate, as well as many others. Tyler Davis, Rook Orororo, who is a very underrated D tackle and somebody who I don't think is recognized well enough yet. I think we're going to see him pop off the screen this year. Linebacker is a relative concern, and I only say that because they're so stacked at D-line and in the secondary. But their linebackers, Trenton Simpson leads that group. He's really like a converted safety, moved down to outside backer. He can move laterally really well. He flies up to the football, makes some good reads. He's also a great pass defender. He'll be joined by Barrett Carter, who impressed last year as a freshman and had a good spring workout. And then also Jeremiah Trotter, who, yes, is the son of the man by the same name. I think that those three will form a formidable group in the middle. And then again, that secondary that we talk about, Jones and Wiggins at corners. Andrew Makuba is going to be an All-American type safety. Dabo loves him and has gushed about him ever since he went on campus. Same thing with Nate Wiggins. We didn't see a lot from Wiggins last year, relatively speaking, but I think he's going to come into his own in this year. But then you get Jalen Phillips, RJ Mickens. They get Landon Zanders back. Venables is also there. Kind of surprised he didn't follow his dad over to Oklahoma. He stayed in Death Valley, and there's good reason for that. Then you look at these numbers defensively. Number 2 in scoring defense and red zone defense. Number 7 in rush defense. Only gave up 96 yards per game on the ground. Number 8 total defense. Number 9 pass efficiency defense. Number 9 in sacks. Number 15 in tackles for loss. And when you look at last year's CFP finalists, 3 of the 4 have a similar formula that Clemson has. Very good defense and a quarterback that can get the job done, but is not necessarily a Heisman Trophy candidate, right? Michigan, Cincinnati, and Georgia last year. Well, Clemson fits much of the same mold. You look at probably the biggest question marks for Clemson are the kind of new offensive coordinator. We already talked about Brandon Streeter on the offensive side, but being the quarterback's coach, I think that's one of the best promotions that you can make when you're running this offense. And we know that Dabo Swinney also likes to have a hand in the offense. And then on defense, Wes Goodwin. There's a lot of things that have been said about how respected he is, and I'm hoping for Clemson's sake that that's true, and it's not just rhetoric that the coaching staff counseled their guys on to say, okay, when you talk to the media, when people ask, really build up this guy to give the impression that it's his time and that he's next in line, right? So, clearly losing Brent Venables is a big loss, but really doesn't matter who the D coordinator is. When you've got all that talent that Wes Goodwin is working with, as long as you are studious and prepared and detailed, which all accounts suggest that he is, you're going to do just fine. So let's go to the schedule. Clemson, very, very manageable schedule. So we talked about easy non-conference in 2 of the first 3 games. They play Georgia Tech in the opener, but Georgia Tech is a team that I don't think is putting much fear into anybody, especially in week 1. Maybe they'll get better. We'll see how it goes. But you go down, they play at Wake Forest in game 4, where they have won 13 straight against the Demon Deacons. 12 of those games have been by 14 points or better. So 2 touchdown favorites in 12 of those 13 straight victories. Then they host NC State, where they've beaten the Wolfpack 8 straight times in Death Valley. So the Wolfpack, who is a lot of people's ACC darlings this year, they have to come to Death Valley and take on the Clemson Tigers, who are pissed off that they lost in Raleigh last year. So then the biggest question mark, the biggest test for the Clemson Tigers is at Notre Dame in November. Now, Clemson should be 8-0, Notre Dame should be 7-1, but I think Clemson will have played slightly better competition more recently than Notre Dame. Clemson's also got a bye before that game, whereas Notre Dame, that's their 4th consecutive matchup after their early season bye. Then they get Louisville, Miami, and South Carolina all at home in the last 3 weeks of the season. Against Louisville, Clemson has never lost to the Cardinals, and I think that Louisville is going to be a better team in the ACC this year than most people give them credit for, but they're not going to be good enough to win in Death Valley against an undefeated Clemson team who by then should be on a hot streak. Miami, Clemson's beaten Miami 3 straight, and they've beaten them by pretty big margins in those 3 consecutive wins. Now, it's a new coaching staff, slightly better roster than they've had in years past, and I think better developers of talent, better coordinators, but still, Clemson much more established than that Mario Cristobal Miami new look team will have been at that point. And then against South Carolina, the Tigers have won 7 straight by an average margin of 26 points per game, and I know that Shane Beamer has got things going in the right direction there, or seems to be going in the right direction, and they got some good transfer portal bringovers, but again, it's Clemson and it's in Death Valley. They've won 7 straight, which I think is a series record. And if this game were in Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina, then maybe I would have a little bit of hesitancy. I'd still pick Clemson, but because the game's in Death Valley, because they're running down that hill, touching that rock for the seniors' last game there, that place is going to be jumping, and that'll be essentially to cap off an undefeated season and Clemson going to the ACC championship, working their way toward a college football playoff. So Clemson fans, I know you love this, but the rest of you in ACC country, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I love the banter. Send it back to me. Hit me up on Twitter or Instagram, or send me an email if you got to. I'm Chappy, and this is what I know.